Well, happy Easter. I'm live, right? Yeah. Now, some traditions, not different than ours, what you're supposed to do is one person says, "He is risen," and you say, anybody know how to do this? He is risen indeed. That's the other one. We're going to get to that in just a second. First, I want to welcome everybody. And Barry was talking a little bit ago about the concept we have of welcome home. And welcome home means we really believe we let you in no matter what. If I can be the pastor, anybody can come to the church. It's a basic rule. And that means we have people come in with lots and lots of real big problems. We've got people come in that are battling drug problems. We've got people battling guilt issues. We've got people with strong family issues. And by drug problems, I mean some of you people got drugged to church today against your will. That was supposed to be like a drum roll, but it didn't really come out. It was just missed by that much. You got drug problems. Some of you got guilt problems because you were raised, if you don't go to church on Easter, you're supposed to feel real guilty. So you came today just as a salve. And some of you got family issues because if tonight Mama finds out you didn't go to church on Easter, we got issues, right? And so, a lot of times people show up at church, especially on Easter, because you're supposed to, because you don't want the guilt, because somebody drugged you, whatever the reason. And I think what would sum it up would be, if for a lot of people, if I say He is risen, your response might be not He is risen indeed, but so what? Oh, I got ahs and gasps. But really, I mean, for a lot of people, there's going to be a couple different responses on that. There's going to be the so what, because, I mean, it sounds pretty weird, a guy walking out of a grave. I don't believe that's real. I don't know that, there are people probably here in this room who don't really believe Jesus rose from the dead. They think it's just sort of a story that people have told, that Christians kind of put together to try to, keep their religion going. And then even more, there's probably some people here that, so what? It's 2,000 years ago, dude. Name anything that happened 2,000 years ago that's actually relevant to me, that actually impacts the way I live my life more than one day a year. And even if you're here and you're a follower of Christ, you do everything you can, all that, recognize that everybody you run into during the week, most of the people, the overwhelming majority of the people you are going to run into this week, if you say to them, Jesus is risen, they won't say it out loud, but the response in the back of their head is, so what? It's an ancient myth, or even if it's an ancient reality, dude, it's ancient. Matter of fact, we're starting a series today called So What? And we're going to today is He is risen, so what? We're going to look at different things from the Bible, and we're going to say, okay, A, did it really happen? And B, if it did, what's it mean to me? Does it have any impact should it have any, why would it have any impact on my life? So today, as you might expect, we're doing the resurrection because, it's kind of like Easter and everything. And if you want to, we're going to read the story, and then I'm going to talk a lot more about it. If you want to turn on your Bible, or use the QR code on your teaching guide to pull up the notes. And if you don't want to bother, you just want to listen, that's cool too. In Matthew 28, Jesus he was crucified on Friday. Most of you got that part. You got that memo. And He's been in the tomb for a couple days. It says in chapter 28, verse 1, early on Sunday morning, as the new day was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went out to visit the tomb. Now notice it doesn't say they went out to see Jesus. Why doesn't it say they went out to see Jesus? He was dead. Okay, now this is something you need to, if you're a Christian, you need to get this in your head, because we have this where we know the story, we know how the story ends, and so we assume it on everybody in the story. How many people have you known who were dead and got over it? Now, I'm not talking about one of those, the heart stopped beating for 45 seconds, which is serious, but that's only mostly dead. Okay, we're talking really dead, as in go through the pockets looking for loose change dead. Okay, that's what we're talking about with Jesus here. He's been dead for 3 days. He's really, really dead. You've never known anybody who got over it. They really haven't either. And so they're women, they're going to the tomb because 3 days earlier, Jesus was crucified, and then two guys hastily buried him. Which means, guys, what's that mean? It means the women got to go and get it right. Are you with me? That's what's going on here, is the dudes no doubt did the burial thing wrong, so they have to go out and fix it and get it situated right. Okay? So that's why they're going. They're not expecting anything except to make a tomb better. That's all they're going for. In verse 2, suddenly there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, rolled aside the stone, and sat on it. His face shone like lightning, and his clothing was as white as snow. The guards shook with fear when they saw him, and they fell into a dead faint. Then the angel spoke to the women. "Don't be afraid," he said. "I know you're looking for Jesus, who was crucified. He isn't here. He is risen from the dead, just as he said would happen. Come see where his body was lying, and now go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead, and he's going ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him there. Remember what I've told you." Now, a lot of people look at that story, and view it as a story, as a fiction, as a stylized retelling that the early church came up with to kind of keep the story going so they could have their religion working for them. But I believe it's really true. I believe if you'd have shown up with your phone, you could have gotten a selfie the next day with Jesus. Okay? When he came to, you could have, I believe it's that kind of real. Okay? And I'm not just making it up, and I'm not saying because I feel it in my heart. I'm saying it because if I look at the reality of what actually happened, the stuff that's documented that nobody can possibly deny, if I look at that, I believe the best answer to the question, what happened, is Jesus was crucified and he got up 3 days later. I think it's the best answer. And I guess one way to help you understand why I think that way, we just finished a series, Jessica and I team taught this one, called Me Too. And some of you were here for that. And we talked about the whole concept of how it started in Hollywood with women starting to stand up for their right to be viewed as humans and not as sex objects to be used by the men in power for whatever they wanted. And there's been and we had a series on that. And one of the things that I didn't talk about, or we didn't talk about at all during it, was what started it. Because a lot of people talk about, like, Alyssa Milano was an actress who tweeted Me Too and it caught on like crazy. That's not what started it. Because, first question, how long have men in power been abusing women in Hollywood? Probably close to a century. If you say a century, you're not making it up. You're getting in the ballpark here. That would put it back to the beginning. That makes sense. And for that entire time, there have been men in power abusing their power to take advantage of women. And for most of the time, occasionally, a woman would step up and say, so-and-so did this to me. And invariably, one of two things happened. They were either hushed or crushed. Either a people pulls out and say, really? I mean, we got a big picture coming up. This is just not a really good time to talk about. Could you maybe just keep this quiet? And they'd agree. And if they didn't agree, they got crushed and their career was ended at that moment, right? Well, over the past decade or so, I'm not sure exact number, years, when it would have started, but women started getting more power in Hollywood, coming in, not just as actresses, but as producers, as studio heads, real power. And there were, at the same time, a few men who were raised up who were going, you know what? They somehow accidentally got the Bible perspective on how you're supposed to treat females as people of value and honor, not as objects to be abused. And some men recognize the concept that we believe is very biblical, that God gives a person power so they can use that power to help others. That's the point of power from God's perspective. And there were enough people that one time, probably in the past year, a woman stepped forward and said, Harvey Weinstein did a bad thing to me. And normally, she would have been hushed or crushed because Harvey Weinstein is was one of the most powerful men in Hollywood. Way, way, way up on the power scale. But because there were women in power and men who have a little bit of a brain more in power, when she said it, she was believed and listened to. because there's an umbrella of protection that has risen up. And the first person steps up and she speaks her truth and she doesn't get hushed or crushed. So another woman goes, wait a second, she did it and didn't get hushed or crushed. What'll happen if I do it? And she stepped up. And then another one, and then another one. And then somebody says, hey, what if we talk about somebody other than Harvey Weinstein? What'll happen? And they stepped up and they didn't get hushed or crushed. And the movement exploded, okay? Now, there's something you need to see there. The women who came forward and were hushed and crushed were no less brave than the ones who stepped up and weren't. But it points to something very, very important as far as humans and how we operate. Because one of maybe our biggest driving emotion and system is safety. We will do almost anything to be safe. And here's your first point if you're going to fill in a blank. People very rarely tell a truth that will make them unsafe. If announcing that something is true will make you unsafe, almost nobody will do it, hardly ever, except in extremely special circumstances. And you're saying, I don't know, I'm a stand-up person. I always speak the truth. Let me put you in a situation and see how you think you'd handle it. Let's say that you go to there's this gathering, there's about 16 people in a room, 15, 16 people in a room. And I'm gonna do a hypothetical. I'm gonna do this because I'm sure there's nobody in the room who fits this criteria, but I wanted to use it just as an example. Let's say that you are, I don't know, a real big proponent of guns. You really defend, I know in a military community, you're not gonna find anybody who's a gun nut. You're not gonna find anybody in this room, but let's just pretend that you're that way. And if you're packing, don't raise your hand right now. Okay? But let's just say you're the kind of person who will occasionally engage in arguments online about this stuff, or if somebody brings it up, you have your points and you defend them well. And you believe this, and this is your truth, and you believe it very strongly. And you're at this gathering, and one of the people starts out with this just tirade about how horrible guns are and how they should be outlawed and nobody should be allowed to have guns, and if somebody has too many guns, they should be thrown in jail. And you're locked and loaded. Okay? You are ready. You've got your argument ready. You are coming at them, and you are coming at them hard. You're going to use illegal weapons of mass destruction on this person. But while you're drawing back, when the person finishes, another person jumps in and says the exact same thing in different words. And then a third, and a fourth, and a fifth, to where everybody in the room but you has said something that you disagree with completely. What's going to happen? You're going to go, you know what? That timing's just not right. Right? This is just not the right. I would be saying they're not going to listen to me anyway. There's no reason. Because even in that little bit of safety, just that little bit of safety of being in a room with 15 people where nobody's going to get hurt, hardly anybody is going to step up unless it's something huge for them. Very few people are going to step up and say anything that will make them unsafe, even on a small level like that. Because people do not speak things, even if they're true, if it'll make them unsafe. In the same way, those women who had been abused wouldn't step forward and say anything because they knew it was unsafe to do so. Now, what's that got to do with the resurrection? Well, let's back up a couple thousand years. You've got this guy named Jesus. Now, let's set the stage where he's at. He is in the area we now call Israel, that Middle Eastern area right now, and the nation of Israel is under oppression from the Roman government. The Romans are mean and vicious, and they support the peace of Rome, the Pax Romana, with an iron fist and an iron boot. And Israel doesn't like this, as you can imagine. And they have seen in their prophecies that there's a person coming called Messiah. And when Messiah comes, he'll fix it. He'll overthrow the Roman government, he'll do all the things they need done, and he'll restore them to power. And so they're waiting for Messiah. They're waiting for Christ is another word for that. And here comes this dude named Jesus. Now, there have been a lot of guys claiming to be Messiah. There have been a bunch of them. And here comes Jesus. And Jesus seems different. Man, he speaks with authority. He does some awesome stuff. And there's a number of people. There's a huge crowds that follow him. And then inside, there's a few dozen people that are committed that Jesus is Messiah. And they come to pass over the biggest event of the Jewish year, and the city is packed, over 1 million people, and they are convinced it is time. He's going to throw down the gauntlet, overthrow the Roman government. It's all starting now. And then he gets crucified. Now, there are job requirements to be Messiah. One of the job requirements, breathing. A dead Messiah ain't a Messiah. He's a guy you thought was Messiah. And we get all crazy sometimes because all of his followers fled. All of them ran away. You know what? That was the right thing to do. Because when your Messiah dies, it means you are backing the wrong Messiah. And so on Friday, the crucifixion, they run away. On Saturday, they are all scared and hiding. And Monday, they're all running around proclaiming Jesus is risen. He's the Messiah. He's the Savior of the world. They're saying all this crazy stuff about a guy who was dead just a couple days earlier. And here's the thing. A lot of people say, well, yeah, see, they made that story up because they wanted to promote their new religion. They said, we know we can start a new religion based on Jesus because he taught a lot of really cool things. So why don't we make up the story that he rose from the dead, and we'll tell that story, and we'll get lots of followers. There's a flaw in that theory, and that is, wasn't too long after Jesus rose from the dead, in my opinion, that a guy named Stephen got executed for saying Jesus is risen. Now, Stephen was a bit obnoxious. It comes with the name. But it's not much longer that a guy named James, who's one of the leaders of the early church, who's a much more soft-spoken, a much more reasonable person, he gets executed. And they start throwing people in jail, and suddenly it's not safe. And I said earlier that people won't speak a truth that puts them in danger. Well, people will never tell a lie that makes them unsafe. I mean, well, maybe proclaim, maybe, if you're a spy, you'll go undercover and you'll make a basic lie. But even if you're a spy, even if you're undercover, what do you do as soon as you get undercover? You start saying things that keep you safe. Right? Your whole drive is I have to stay safe for my own benefit and to finish the mission. So even a spy spends most of his time staying safe. Well, meanwhile, back in Jerusalem, those few dozen followers of Christ are getting tortured and beaten and killed. All because they keep saying he is risen. And all any of them have to do to make that stop is say he wasn't. They could have shut off all the torture, shut off all the pain. They could have placed themselves in a safe position. All they got to do is say he didn't rise from the dead. That's all they got to do. And they won't do it. They keep not doing it. All of them do it to death. I mean, to their death. Which tells me something. The only way to explain that, they believed Jesus rose from the dead. They believed they saw him die. They believed that he was buried, and they believed that he got up and got over it and appeared to dozens of them. And they believed it so much they were willing to die for it. Now, how do you make that many people believe something? Especially something unpopular, something impossible. Two options. Number one, Jesus fooled them. That's one option. Now, in order to fool them, he can't let himself be really crucified. Okay? He can't be crucified and then walk in 3 days later and say, I am risen. Because after they throw up, once you have a certain number of nails driven into your body and a certain sword poked into your side, and you spend 2 or 3 days in a dark, dusty tomb with no food or water, if you happen to get the door open and you happen to wander into the upper room and say, I am risen, They're not going to call you resurrected, they're going to call you a doctor. So if Jesus faked it, he had to have faked it in the crucifixion. That's some serious magician stuff right there. And the only way to pull that off, if you think about it, you can go home and just process this. If he's going to convince everybody that he's crucified when he wasn't, the Romans have to be in on it. Because the guy driving the nails needs to know to drive the fake nail. Okay? Hey, Titus, you ready to crucify this guy? Okay, that's stupid. So he's really crucified, so he can't fool them, and they really believe it, which leaves us how many options? One. And what's the only option that fits all the evidence that we have for this case? Jesus rose from the dead. That's the only thing that fits the evidence, because these disciples spent their lives living as if they'd seen him, and if they hadn't, they wouldn't have died for it. And there's no other way to make them believe except to see him. Okay? What's that mean to me? Because I think that's a pretty good reason to believe Jesus really rose from the dead, but I've still got my so what question. What's that mean to me? How's a 2,000-year-old resurrection impact my life in any way? Well, I have 3 grandchildren. I know I don't look old enough. Okay? I've got TJ's 4, and Emma is 1.5, and Belle is 3 days old. That was 2 days ago. She's changed a lot. Okay, let's say I come downstairs, because they're staying with us for a while, and I come downstairs, and the 2 that can stand are standing around the dining room table, and and Belle's in a little rocker swingy thing beside the table, and I look on the table, and we've got some Legos at our house, and so we can have fun wandering around it in the dark, barefoot. And we've got our Legos are set up, and I look, and on the table, there is this skyscraper on the table. It's like 3-4 feet high. And it's not just, it's like an architectural wonder of diversity. There's windows in it. There's color schemes sliding on different directions. And the coolest part, it is levitating an inch off the table. It's not touching the table in any way. What am I not going to do? Good job, TJ. Way to go, Emma. Good job, Belle. They couldn't do that, right? It's pretty impossible for anybody, let alone for a 4-year-old. Okay? Now, what have we already discussed? How many people have you known who were dead and got over it? Okay, the number's 0. Okay? Why? Why have you never known a person who was dead 3 or 4 days and got over it? It's really simple. It's not possible. It is an impossibility. We live in a universe that has very specific physical laws, biological laws. There are rules, laws of chemistry. There are all kinds of things that go on. And once a person is dead, not mostly dead, really dead, there's no coming back from that, because the laws of physics and the laws of biology, the way our universe is structured, mean it's impossible. Matter of fact, in the 1800s, there was a guy who was trying to refute Christianity, and his whole argument was that Jesus couldn't have risen from the dead. He wrote a book. Jesus couldn't have risen from the dead because resurrections are impossible. And if all there is this universe, if all there is this creation with the physical laws, the biological laws, all there is this universe, we'll call it a box of the universe. If that's all there is, then yes, resurrection is impossible. Not improbable, not difficult, not challenging, impossible. Which means if Jesus rose from the dead, somebody outside the system had to reach into the system. Somebody or something or some force had to be existing outside our physical universe in a way and with a power to reach into our physical universe. Which means the resurrection, first thing it shows me there's something more. There is something more than just this physical universe. There is something beyond it. Not, ooh, but something. Okay? I mean, Christianity said that forever. We say, in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. We believe there is a being who exists outside the universe who created the universe. And this is where somebody had to reach in, or something. Can we just say somebody and call him God? Would that be all right? We're a church. I can just skip a little bit of this. We'll call him God, and God just reaches in and raises Jesus from the dead. So there's something more. If you've been living your life thinking that all there is the physical stuff, the resurrection says you might need to rethink that position. But there's something else going on. Because the resurrection shows that something outside, which is incredibly powerful to be able to raise a person from the dead, was connected to Jesus. The resurrection shows Jesus was connected to something bigger. Because at his resurrection, that something reached in and raised him from the dead. But that's not the only time it showed up. A few weeks earlier, Jesus had been staying in Jerusalem. And whenever Jesus came to Jerusalem, he had some really good friends. The kind of friends, whenever you come into town, you stay with them. The guy named was Lazarus. He had a sister named Mary and Martha. And they had a sofa with Jesus' name on it. Whenever Jesus was in town, he just sofa surfed right over to their house. And he always spent his weekends at their place. When Jesus is somewhere else out of town on a teaching trip, and Lazarus dies. And Jesus has been doing all these healings. People who are sick get better around him, which is a cool thing to have. And he's out of town, and he lingers, and by the time he gets back to Bethany, which is the little suburb where they lived, Lazarus has been in his grave for about 4 days. And Jesus starts hinting that he wants to like them to move the stone out of the way. And Lazarus' sister, Martha, she's funny, I love her. She goes, Jesus says, move the stone. And Jesus said, and Martha said, it's been 4 days, in the King James. By this time he stinketh. You can't beat that, can you? You just can't beat he stinketh. Okay, and so it's been so long that it's past the point where you can say his heart just stopped. He's dead. And Jesus has him roll away the stone. And then Jesus called out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. So that power that reached into our universe and raised Jesus from the dead reached into the universe through Jesus and raised somebody else from the dead. That's impressive. Anybody done that before? Just walk into a cemetery. I'll take that one, and that one. Open the caskets. No. This is crazy. See, by the way, this is why us Christians talk about Jesus like we do. He was a really good teacher, but there have been lots of really good teachers. He performed some healing miracles. There have been other people in history who've done a few healing miracles. There's nobody that goes around really raising 4-day dead people from the dead. So he's got something here. And the thing I want you to get there from that is the amazing power. But I also want you to think about this. If there's a dude who is that connected with God so that God's power flows through that person in such a way they can raise other people from the dead, what should you do when that person says something? Paying attention's a really good idea. Because I don't know what my rank is in the whole scale of the universe, but my rank ain't as high as his. And if he says something, my response is what? Yes, sir. So I'm not going to keep you a long time today, believe it or not. I want to focus, as I'm kind of halfway closing, on one thing Jesus said. I want you to get one thing he said. And it's not what you're thinking. Because a lot of you, especially if you got drug here, a lot of people in this world think if I'm going to come into the church, if I'm going to become a Christian, if I'm going to even associate with them, what that means is that God sent his son to give us a list of rules. Right? I have come that they may have rules and lots of them. Right? So most of you, when I say Christianity, or a lot of you, when I say Christianity, what you think is a list of things you're supposed to do and a whole great big list of things you're not. Don't do that, don't do that, don't think about that. No! That's how you view Christianity. That's what you think it is. Listen to what Jesus actually said. The dude who rose from the dead and raised somebody else from the dead. Okay? Let's see what he said. Jesus said, I have come that they may have rules. No, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I like that. I like that better than a bunch of rules and regulations, because you know what rules and regulations do for you? The only thing rules and regulations can do for you? Make you feel guilty. Because if they're challenging enough to be real, you're going to mess up. Anybody here have guilt because they messed up on a rule or two? But he didn't say, I came so you could have guilt, or I came so you could have rules. I came so you could have life and have it to the full, have it abundantly, have it overflowing, have it magnificently. And the resurrection, this is the third thing I want you to see. The resurrection shows our lives can be sort of part of something bigger and better. See, this is something people don't like to think about. But you need to think about it. If this universe is all there is, if it's a closed system of laws of physics and biology and energy, and if that's all there is, then nothing you can do has any meaning. Period. What we like to say here is, if the universe is all there is, you are merely dirt in transition. That there's stardust and dirt, and somehow along the way, through some really incredible processes, this dirt became self-aware and intelligent and able to speak. And that the grand result of all this stuff that the universe has done is Justin Bieber. The grand result is us. And we are aware, and we can talk, and we can make rocket ships and all kinds of cool gadgets. And we're all going to die. And we're going to go back to being dirt. So in the history of the universe, there's dirt and energy and dirt and energy and dirt and energy and us. And then dirt and energy and dirt and energy and dirt and energy. And make it even worse. In just a few million years, the sun's going to blow up and take the dirt that we were and make it into just little molecules flying through space at the speed of light or something close to it. And we're just going to be scattered to the universe forever, just being molecules and dirt. And there was this blink. Not even long enough to be considered a blink in the history of the universe that is us. And nothing we do matters. None of it has impact. All of it goes away in the blink of the universe's eye. Or outside of the physical universe is a being of immense power, a being of crazily immense love, who reaches into the universe. Not to raise Jesus from the dead. That wasn't the point. Not so that Jesus could raise other people from the dead. That wasn't the point. So that Jesus, the very Son of God, who was the insertion of God into the universe himself, so that he could walk into a chaotic political situation in Israel, a situation so chaotic that a teacher could get crucified. And he came. And all the things that we do, all the things that all of us do that separate us from God, all the things that we do that we know we're against God's nature and we do them anyway, all the ones that are against God's principles and we do them anyway, all the things that we would call technically sins, if you're looking for a word to plug into that. All those things that separate us from God, so that Jesus could take everything that we do that separates us from God, and because he is God, he can take all of it on himself. And because he lives without ever violating God's nature, violating God's standards, or doing anything that is a sin, he has the capacity to go on a cross and pay the penalty for every sin of every person in this room and every other room on earth. And then 3 days later, he gets to get up, so that he can make it possible for you. You know that power that's reaching into the universe? Do you know why it's reaching into the universe? To grab you. To get you, to bring you to a relationship with him. That's why he did it. That's why he created the universe in the first place, was to create people like us that he could love all the way to the cross and all the way through the resurrection. And then after that, we're not just a blip on the radar. We're not a blink in the universe of time. We have meaning and purpose as God then invites us into his purpose of restoring his creation to all it was meant to be. For you to live into what he designed you to be. You're not an accident. You're on purpose. And you're on purpose because God has a design for your life. And that's true whether you've been a Christian for as long as you can remember, or you're not even one yet. God has a design for your life. And that design is for you to live to the full. Wonder and love and purpose and meaning and value. So that when somebody, if I'm going back to another series, if somebody wants to take advantage of you, you have the value to say no. So if you have an opportunity to do something, you can recognize that what I'm doing has the potential not just to be a blip on the radar of eternity, but to actually make a difference throughout eternity. You have that ability. If the power of the one who raised Jesus from the dead lives in you. And thankfully, God knew better than to make that hard for us. Because he did all the work. We don't have a lot of work to do. And that's what we do, by the way. We introduce people to God. Like a mixer. We bring you here. We make it welcome home, comfortable, safe. Safe enough for us to tell truth to each other. Safe enough for us to ask difficult questions of each other. Safe enough that we can encourage each other toward love and good things. Safe enough that somebody who's far from God, somebody who thinks resurrection, he is risen, so what, can come in and not be judged, not be forced to make a decision, not be forced to do anything except be themselves and ask all the questions you want. And what we believe is that eventually, as we can strip away all the stuff people have about church, all the preconceptions they have about church and how it taints their view of God and taints their view of Jesus, if we can strip all that away so that all you see is the risen Jesus, that eventually you'll say, I want some of that. And eventually you'll say, I want all of that. Now, what we do every week is, if this week you're ready for that, you want to talk to somebody about having that relationship with Christ, every sermon I pick up this bag. And I say, if you're ready for a relationship with Christ, here's all you got to do. We've got a table in the back with some of these bags on it. If you grab one of the bags, we got some people that are trained, and they'll come up to you after the service. If you grab a bag, they'll connect with you. They'll take about 10 minutes, and they'll show you how to have that relationship with Christ. If you're ready for that this week, fantastic. Grab a bag. It's Easter, a great day to accept Christ. And if you're not ready, Come back next week. We're here every week. Okay? Some of you never noticed that because you only come on Christmas and Easter. But really, we're here every week. That was cheap. I apologize. I'm sorry. That's just me. But you come back. You bring yourself and all your problems and all your issues and all your challenges, and you come back next week, and we'll talk some more about God, and we'll talk some more about Jesus, and hopefully you'll learn a little bit more about him. And if you don't make it next week, we're here the week after that. Just pick a week and come back. And take as long as you want. We have people who spend months, if not years, preparing and getting ready and answering all enough questions that they're ready to have a relationship with Christ. And we are perfectly cool with that. We're never going to pressure you. We're never going to tell you, you got to do it this week or what? We're doing the exact same thing, by the way. We don't put on big spectaculars at Easter. We don't have donkeys or doves or anything. It's our awesome worship team that leads in some songs, and somebody will tell you, the basics about our vision. Then I'll get up and talk longer than you wanted me to talk. And then we'll do another song, and we'll have some announcements, and we'll go home, and we'll repeat. And every week you get a chance to ask more questions and learn a little bit more about God and make that ultimate decision. Now, if you've already made the decision and you haven't been baptized, baptism is the way that we announce it. It's just, da-da-da, I am a Christian. And so we do that first Wednesday of every month. That's coming up. If you haven't been baptized, let us know. We'll get you plugged in. If you want to start really living into God's design for your life, we have a class for that. We teach you how to do that. It's 4 weeks classes. The first one's tonight. I teach it. We'll be over in the cafe area. Just join me at 6. You don't have to sign up. You'll be done with your ham stuff by then. By 6, you can eat ham, nap. 6 o'clock, be here with me. That's my plan. And you're welcome to come and just learn about God's design for your life and how it fits in some ways, how this church fits into that process of you becoming that person. It could be while we've been talking that something's come up and you've got something you'd like to pray about. God's touched your heart or something, or there's a problem in your life you want to talk to God about. We've got a cross right in the corner, and the purpose of that cross is during this next song, you just go over there and pray. Whatever you want to pray about. Nobody's going to bother you. Nobody's going to ask you what you're up to. If you want to pray with somebody, we've got some people lined up around the outside of the auditorium who'd love to pray with you, but they'll only pray with you if you go ask them. They're not going to interfere. They're not going to butt themselves into your life, but they're available. Also, if you want to take communion to remind yourself of everything that happened on Easter and all that Jesus did for you, we've actually got 4 communion stations today because of Easter. There's one here, one there, and one there. On each of the 4 corners. During this next song, you're going to go take communion to remind yourself of all Christ did for you. That'd be great. Let me close with a warning. I only scratched the surface of what will happen if you fully acknowledge the reality of what it means that Jesus rose from the dead. Because if you choose to be a follower of Christ, what you do is you turn that power that came through him loose in your life. And he'll mess you up. Because he's got a design for your life that is so much better than what you're living right now without him. He's got things that he knows can be fixed in your life. He's all that guilt you're carrying around, man, he's got a fix for that. All that powerlessness you feel, he's got a fix for that. All that I don't have a meaning and purpose, he's got a fix for that. But there's stuff he's got to rearrange your furniture. He's got to do some work in your life to prepare you for it. He'll just keep working, and he'll keep working, and he will change you, and he will change you, and he will change you. And in place of all the problems, in place of all the challenges, in place of all the guilt and the pain, which will still be part of life, but he'll plug in some joy and some more joy. And he'll take out some more guilt and he'll plug in some more joy for the rest of your life. And if you do it right, if you fully commit to the fact that the resurrection really happened and that it really matters to me, there will come a point when someone will come up to you and say, he is risen. And instead of thinking to yourself, so what? you will think or maybe say, He is risen indeed.